Hey guys, before we get into today's episode, I just want to give a quick heads up. This conversation includes some heavy and sensitive topics, things like mental health, trauma, and other experiences that might be triggering for some people. If that's you, please take care of yourself. Reach out to someone you trust or contact a local support service. These conversations are real and raw, but they're shared to bring hope, healing, and understanding. You ready?
Yeah.
How nervous.
I'm not nervous. You're nervous.
Mm.
I don't mind a microphone.
What's that?
I don't mind a microphone.
Well, we're here, babe.
Yeah.
It's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Rise Above podcast. Something I've wanted to do for a long time is just bring in people to have real raw conversations, not the surface level stuff, just the stuff that I suppose sometimes we want to hide from others. And I just know the power of vulnerability and how we can continually share our testimony and things that have challenged us in our life to help other people, and essentially that's what I want to do. I brought you in today.
Might be a mistake.
Maybe a bit of a risk, but not as an opportunity to have pot shots at me, but obviously, being real, vulnerable and honest, you've been a massive part of my transformation as a man. Obviously at the forefront of all that is Jesus, and he's, first place in that, but you're a close second. Without you both in my life, I'm probably not here today. So I'm, really grateful for that. But I just want to also, acknowledge that, as far as everything that I do, in my life, and, we've got a beautiful family and everything that comes with it. Sometimes, on Instagram, in public, and places, we can, have on this facade like we've got this perfect life, and a lot of people think that of us. But
Yeah.
I need other people as well, and other partners and wives, to see from, your point of view, to know what I go through and kind of what I'm like behind closed doors as well. And like I said, that's a bit of a risk I've taken today, but we're both pretty open and honest, and I just think that's a big part of what I want to do, and I want to give everyone a bit of a perspective of what not only I'm about, but we're about as a family.
Yeah. I think it's good for me to come on here and kind of share my side as well, obviously, because like you said, we've this has been a big part of our lives, just going on this journey, and you sort of just figuring everything else out. And I think, like you said, a lot of people have looked at us and thought that we're like perfect, on Instagram and social media. People look at us and go, "Oh, what a perfect couple." And I think we have found a lot of, I would say, freedom probably in becoming more real and authentic about what we've been through and what you've been through, and what what we've been through in our marriage. And lately, we've been getting a lot of people saying, like, thank you for just being so honest and open about it, because people don't talk about it. So I think it'll be really good for, you to just share your story with people. And then, like you said, not just having it from your point of view, having it from my point of view as well, because I think a lot of women and wives will probably listen to this and go, okay, but how is it from, from the wife's point of view, and that sort of thing. Obviously, I've only been a part of your journey for the last 7 years, and your journey started before me. But I think you've just had such a massive transformation over the last, just like, honestly, the last like 6 months even has been like your biggest transformation. But I think it'll be good to just tell everyone sort of where you started, and how you sort of got into this field, and what gives you a good opinion or expertise on this sort of topic. So,
Yeah, that's good. And I think the biggest thing from that too is, like, I'm no expert, but at the same time, I've got lived experience, and I know a lot of people can relate with that. And that's why I'm always encouraging people to open up and, share their life, because you don't know what people are going through, and you don't know how many people can relate to what you're going through. And I've just found that every time I'm open, I'm honest and vulnerable with my own situation, people are drawn to that. And I just want to continually do that. Before we get into it as well, I just want to thank Active Coolangatta. They're sponsoring the podcast, and been a big help with my mission as well,
Yeah.
with Men of Gold, providing my men's group down there a space where men can come and be vulnerable and open up and share. And I don't take that relationship lightly. It's such a great community environment that a big part of my life every day, every morning. So thanks to Joe and the team for seeing, my passion behind this and getting on board. So
Yeah, they were actually a
appreciate them.
big part of your journey.
Mm,
They've
so
had a lot to do with it. So yeah, thanks to them. How do we want to start? Do we go all the way back?
I suppose so.
I think maybe start from, where your journey with mental health started, I guess, and your challenges and what area of your life that sort of began in.
Yeah, well, for a lot of people have known my story, but there's going to be probably a lot of people following this, which I hope that haven't really heard it all. And that's why I want to have this opportunity to do that. But it's when it all kind of started, I suppose knowing what I know now, it started from a young age. But as a little kid, all I wanted to do was play rugby league. As little as I was at 6, I had this dream to play in the NRL and win a comp and do a lap of honour with my 2 kids. And I got to live out that dream in the UK. But to have that mindset at a young age, I always had a desire to want to achieve something. And all my life, that's all I wanted to do. Throughout my, I suppose, childhood, I grew up in a family that, just used to sweep a lot of things under the rug. That was,
Pretty perfect from the outside.
well, yeah, always. Like, I mean, we had a fancy house in Goulburn, and similar to us to an extent, like people would look at mum and dad and our family and think we got it all. And we had a lot of materialistic things, and we were quite well off. Mum and dad worked really hard, and can't take that away from them. But me personally, I struggled majority of my life with so much, and I kept it all inside, and I didn't know how else to kind of deal with it. And I suppose for me, a critical point in my life was when I was about 13, 14. Mum and dad went through a divorce, and probably 12 months leading up to this, I seen, so much when mum and dad thought I was in bed, and I'd sit up and, listen to them fight and argue, and used to just pray that they'd just split up, and one day that prayer was answered, and just my life was crushed. At the time, I wanted to go with mum. Mum was moving to New Zealand, and it was my whole life had just turned upside down. Um, I was so close with mum, I just couldn't think of being apart from her, and I was just kind of at a part in my life where I wanted to either continue playing footy or wasn't too sure, and mum forced me to stick at it and to not come to New Zealand, and I'm so glad I did, but it was really hard. I didn't see mum for 12 months, and you know, saying goodbye to her in Sydney, and to know that you'll never see her for 12 months is really, really hard. And at the time, you can't really comprehend that. Um,
And it's funny because you didn't really see that as a huge pivotal moment in your life. And then when we met, and I think of myself sometimes as a psychoanalyst, I was like, what happened in your childhood? Like, why have you got some of these things? And it's almost like you couldn't recall that part of your life for a long time. And then we started going to like therapy and things like that, and you started to realize how much of an impact that had on your life. And I don't think you truly understood. Now you do, obviously, because it makes you emotional. But just something as small as that set you up for so much in your life that, good and bad, you became, from what I understand, you became very self-sufficient. And, I won't tell your story, I'll let you tell it, but it was such a pivotal moment in your life, and you didn't even realize it for
mm,
such a long time until you were, 35, 36 years old.
yeah, I suppose I just had to grow up quick,
Mm,
and that was, psychologists would tell me one part of that was great for looking after myself and growing up, but I lost a lot of my childhood due
mm,
to that, which is, um, something that you never get back. But it all shaped me into who I am today, and I can't go back. I've always said I don't have any regrets and in life, and I've made some silly decisions and made some really bad mistakes in my life, but I've learned from them. And if we can make these mistakes and learn from them, then that's okay. But
Mm.
going back to that time, um, I was Dad did his best. I always say, I talk about being vulnerable and being in that setting. Like, I had a pretty much free reign from then, not because Dad was, you know, not being a father. It was just we just had to get by, and
Mm.
I I become, grown up really fast, but found myself doing things on my own. But then actually getting used to it. And for a lot of people that know me, I'm a bit of a control freak. And um, it's because I don't like relying on people. I've always got to a point where I'm like, I want to be able to do it. And I want to do it yesterday. And I don't have a great deal of patience at times, but I think it's all stemmed from just going, well, it's always been up to me,
Yeah.
and I have never had anyone else to really do it for me. So I didn't have an option.
Mm.
Um,
You became pretty self-sufficient at the age of like 15.
yeah, well, I left home at 15,
Yeah.
and I go on to finish high school in Wollongong, and went to Dapto High and moved in with a family of four boys, and a mum and dad, and then there was another guy that was just boarding there at the time. So you can imagine this household, and I just struggled because I seen what they had and I didn't have it. So it was emotionally, I was a bit rebellious there. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I spent more time at her house than I did there, and they didn't like that I was never home, and so I kind of was kicking cans for a while.
Was
And
that because you had to live away from home to do footy?
yeah, so I was living in
Or
Wollongong, and obviously it's an hour and a half drive to Goulburn,
ah,
so I moved there permanently, going to school. But I went to school in Dapto where I lived, and I just didn't like that I was in someone else's family, and I
mm,
suppose I wasn't dealing with probably what I was going through internally. But so I was acting out, I suppose. But I just didn't want that. I wanted to, be out on my own. But I
mm,
knew at that age I couldn't do that. But I moved in with a couple of other families that I'm so grateful for. Like, you think of our situation now and taking in a 15-year-old.
mm,
They didn't have to do that, and the love and support I had from those other two families as well is something that I'm so grateful for. But it just got all too hard, and I could tell the families were just fed up with how I was. And the Dragons at the time took me into the Dragons house, which there was four boys living in Coniston in Wollongong, and we had a Filipino nanny, and that would cook and clean for us. And she actually used to live at the house, but she moved out so I could move in, and she'd just come, cook, clean, and that's where I got introduced to migarang. If she was having a rough night, she'd just cook us migarang and put it on the plate, glad wrap
Man,
it, and would be there when we got home from training. But I think that's time. I was 16, and at that stage, I had a
that's
fake
crazy living on
ID.
your own at 16. Like
Well, I was living
with
with other
yeah,
guys.
but no parental figures,
Mm,
you know? I think of the 16-year-old, your son's almost 16, thinking of him in a house with some boys,
mm,
no parental guidance. That's like a lot.
mm.
Some of this is the first time I'm hearing this. Not the first time, but like in more detail anyway.
Yeah. So, but I liked that. I liked, like I said, I felt like I just was in a house, full of brothers, and it was just us. And uh, I mean, we got up to a little bit of mischief, but nothing too
Mm.
extravagant. Like I was just saying, I had a fake ID, and as everyone did that time. But
Well, it's all coming out now.
I was going out on a Wednesday night in Wollongong, to the Glass House, and going to school the next day, like just getting up to things that most people were doing at that time. But um, it was, the start of, I suppose, being out my own. And apart from the time being in Melbourne, when I first went down there and lived with mum for a little bit, I was never in a family setup after that.
Mm,
So it was, um,
yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty young to be out on your own. I mean, I was the same, but
Mm.
yeah. But I mean, I attribute, you being such a good house husband to that time because I'm always like, why is he so good at cooking and cleaning and doing this and doing that? And you learnt it from early on to just do it for yourself.
Mm.
So, it's not that you like go, "Oh, this is what I have to do to, be a good husband or anything." You've just always done that. Like, when I first met you, I was like, "What's wrong with this guy? Is he like,
No,
something's not right here." He just, like, cooks and cleans and, you have everything, your house in order. And I realize you have a bit of OCD, but,
mm,
you know,
amongst other
it
things.
was it was good.
But yeah, anyway, that I finished up in high school there and um, got signed by the Sharks and went up, finished high school, went up to Cronulla at 17. I was still 17 and lived in the Sharks house there. We did have someone that lived in with us then, and um, there was four of us there, five of us at one point. One of the lads moved out, I think, and um, yeah, we had the time of our life there. We ended up getting kicked out because we were up to no good. And then, yeah, I suppose after that, I stayed at Cronulla then for a few more years. Ended up playing first grade there, and really enjoyed my time. Cronulla is a beautiful place, and had an opportunity to go to the Cowboys. Offered me more money and something I didn't want to do initially, but I had to take the opportunity and again pack up and move again. And Townsville was, an eye opener. It was so hot. As people know me, I'd sweat in aircon, so it was it was tough. Training was hard, but again, another great opportunity to do something I loved, and I was so grateful for it. I then at the second year of that, my ex-wife, I met her, and she fell pregnant with our first child, Jet, and that was in 2009. Jet was born in 2010 in February, and at the end of 2009, I didn't have an NRL contract. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing, and I ended up at Burleigh Bears. I moved to the Gold Coast for 12 months, and my ex-wife was from the Gold Coast, so naturally thought it was a good transition, having our first child, and um, yeah, spent 12 months here at Burleigh, and Jet was born, and did some odd jobs here and there, trained with the Titans part time, and then got the opportunity to sign at Penrith. And Penrith, I was there for 3 and a bit years, and one of the most enjoyable times of my NRL career. But throughout that time, that's when I suppose the first time of my mental health issues started to arise. And as you know now, I can be very miserable at times. I can be, shut off a lot of the time, and I was doing this behaviour probably worse than you've ever seen, and my wife at the time couldn't handle it and said I needed to go get help, and I went and got the help and sought out doctors and to see what's wrong with me, and the worst thing I probably did was ignore what they told me, but they said you've got depression and you're riddled with anxiety. And at the time, I've always said this, I used to think I was like 24 years old, and I was thinking at that age, I was earning a great deal of money. I just bought a home. I've got a child and one on the way. And I'm like, how could I be depressed?
That's
And
so young.
yeah.
24 is so young to, like, have all of that on your shoulder. I didn't even know you were that young. That's
Mm.
crazy.
And then, yeah, so I just ignored it because my education around depression and what it was back then was, if you're depressed, you look at people that are homeless or, they can't afford things or whatnot, or out on the streets, like, which we now know that's not true. But initially that was what I thought. So I ignored it because I couldn't feel and go to people and say I was depressed when people would go, what have you got to be depressed about? Like I said, house, wife, married, kids, like I just couldn't do it. So I ignored it. And it was the worst thing I ever did. And I just got on with my life, and I tried to, I suppose, manage my own life myself. And when I was miserable, I tried to cover that up and just try to work through it. And it was an awful time. But I then fast forward, I end up leaving Penrith, go to Melbourne, and my behaviour was pretty consistent, but it was probably not as bad as it was at Penrith. But I then go to the UK, and I left the Storm, went over to the UK, and when I went to the UK, it was a big transition, obviously for the family as well, and I started to get these feelings back that I had when I was 24, and they probably got to the worst they've ever got to. And to put things in perspective, like, and I'll say straight up, I was no superstar playing rugby league, but when you go to the UK, they make you feel like an absolute star. And I lived in this little town in Lee, and I was made to feel like a superstar. I got enriched in the community. I was doing some great things, but looking back, I was doing so much. I was keeping busy all the time because I didn't want to accept what was going on internally.
You were helping, like, you were doing a lot of charities, you were working with, like, a lot of organizations and stuff to, you know, which was amazing. And when I met you, I was like, that's incredible. What an incredible guy. But obviously, there was so much that you were ignoring to try and not mask what you were feeling, but going, well, I'm doing all these other things and, I'm feeling good about that. And I think that's very common for, we've spoken about this a lot of the time, a lot. Men seem to do that. They kind of go, okay, well, this will make me feel good and this will make me feel good. And I'll ignore all the stuff that's underneath all that surface. So, even while you were doing all those great things, there was just, I know now that there was so much underlying for you, especially in that time when you were in the UK.
Yeah, and like I say, what we do know now, and not just in my case, is that people who do struggle with mental health and go through these things find it easier to help other people because it hides, not so much hides it, but it deflects from what they're going through, and it puts the focus on someone else. So for that moment in time, they can have a focus somewhere else instead of thinking of what they're going through. But in saying that too, like, I really enjoyed doing that. And again, I've always said, I look back at my life and I've always been in service to others. Something that I've always loved to do and help other people. And young Ben, to put things in perspective, had this visit to the hospital, and they knew my background, the club, and they said, we need you to go out and see this young kid in hospital, and he's just been diagnosed with cancer, and he was 10 years old, and it was born with cerebral palsy, so he's never walked a day in his life. He's in a wheelchair for all his life, and he'd just been diagnosed with leukemia. And I come into that hospital visit with not sure how that was going to go, and having your own kids, it's always hits home, to see someone like that. And he was the most positive, upbeat person I've ever met. Like, and not just in a kid, just in any person. And just broke my heart that this kid, and we struggle and we go through things in life, but when we put things in perspective, like, this kid had never been able to walk before, never been able to do a lot of things himself, and on top of that gets diagnosed with cancer. And will he live? No one knows at that time, but he was so focused, and all he dreamed of is, like, when I finish this and get through, beat cancer, I just want to go to Jamaica. And to have that mindset was incredible, and something that so many admired and got behind, and the whole town of Lee got behind him, and we raised so much money for him, and we created Ben's Wish. And I suppose, like I said, I used a lot of my time in the UK to help Ben, but I didn't do it just to hide my issues, but that kept me busy, so I was so busy training, playing footy, I was distracted all the time. And I've always said, when I'm distracted, it takes me away from what I'm actually going through. And in this time, it was again, I don't know how you want to, summarize that, but it was what was happening. But I was getting a great kick out of helping Ben in the community see it. Was incredible. I'd never change a thing that we did with that. And he beat cancer, and it was an amazing story. But within, I was just broken, and I found it really hard to understand still through this journey that, I'd go to training and I could be this one person, and then as soon as I left training, I could be a completely different person. And you've seen that. And yeah, and a lot of the guys used to joke about me, having bipolar, and
Well, when we met, I definitely thought you were bipolar. I was like, you need to go and get checked, because sometimes it's like I was married to two different people. But I asked you that, and we've been through a lot, and we'll sort of get into a bit of that. But I said, how did you, show up as one person, then go home, be another person? You just said, I used to compartmentalize. And that was like the first time I'd really heard of that, and looking into it, being like, wow, people can literally just shut off a part of their brain. I think men are definitely a lot better than women, because we struggle to shut off a lot of our emotions and how we feel and things like that. But for men, it's very, very common that they can be one person somewhere and be another person somewhere else and not even think twice about it, like not feel bad, not, yeah, like you can just block out a whole area of your life. And that's just wild to me. But understanding that that's what a lot of people do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so that was hard to understand that. But then I, yeah, again, come home and I'd just be shut off. And, I used to think too that I I went and worked, I trained, I brought in all the money and that was my job. So, and again, I still did things around the house, don't get me wrong. I didn't think that was just a woman's job, but I thought being present as a father and doing all the things was, all in service of like, earning money,
Mm.
working hard, doing all that. And
Traveling, like,
yeah,
your
and
family's going everywhere and
yeah,
yeah.
so that's all and so I never used to think I was a bad dad, but um, I probably was never present. And again, you've seen a lot of this even, in the later stages of my life. It's like
Mm.
I never, yeah, when the kids were little, I suppose I was. In some extent, but there was a lot of times on reflection that I was there, but I wasn't there, and sometimes I was so caught up in my own stuff and being busy, and then dealing with my mental issues. So
Mm.
it got really bad to a point, obviously that suicide was on my mind every morning. I was in such a bad way that I just honestly felt like life would be better without me here, and
That was in
um,
the UK?
that was in the UK, yeah,
Mm.
and that's why I struggled to understand that how can I have these thoughts every morning I wake up, but then have a shower, have a coffee, go to training, and perform like no tomorrow. Like
Mm.
how I like played in the UK was probably the best I've ever performed, other than a period when I was in Penrith. But I couldn't fathom that, and that sent me mixed messages of was I really struggling, or was it just thoughts? I just didn't know, but I could literally get up and those thoughts would disappear. Don't get me wrong. As soon as I was busy or distracted, but I'd go to train and do what I had to do, and then I'd come back and I was just miserable again. And obviously, over time, this went on. I explained the first year at the club, I won every award at the presentation, and I don't say that to gloat, but it was just to give you a perspective of how well I was going professionally, but
Mm.
internally and as a dad, a husband, as a friend, I was just a broken person, and no one other than my wife that would see some things at home. No one had any idea.
Mm.
Um, and one person that I met in the UK who's a lifetime friend now, Simon. Simon, to put things in perspective, he's 61 the other day, his birthday, and I met him for the first time. And I'm always say these things aren't coincidence. I met Simon for the first time, and in that first conversation, he opened up about his past, and he went through hell and back. He didn't have kids because his ex-wife had two small children when they met, and just devoted his whole life to this woman. And to find out what he did and what had been going on for so long, just broke my heart to hear him share that. But it also grateful that someone who had just met me felt
Mm.
comfortable to share that with me. And that was another big part of me feeling like, why are people drawn to share with me? And so I'm like, I'm helping all these other people, but I can't help myself. And Simon becomes a big part of my life, and still is. Like, I love him like a father, and he was such a big part of my life over in the UK. The day I left the UK was probably one of the most emotional times of my life. To see two big grown men just be a mess, like it was,
Mm.
yeah, it was sad.
Yeah.
So I just, obviously wish the UK was bloody closer. Um,
Explain that, like, how you came to leave the UK, because that's a huge, huge part of your story.
yeah, I wasn't doing too well professionally. I had a lot of injuries. The back end of my career, I kept getting surgery after surgery to just pretty much keep me on the field. I knew I wasn't doing well, but I'd signed a 3-year deal at the club. I was going to earn a lot of money, and that was all I was focused on. This is the last opportunity I'll get before I'm done, and I wanted to set up the family, and I felt like this was the opportunity to do it. But at the same time, probably wasn't being honest with myself professionally. But my wife and I were, not well, and just one day her grandfather passed away, which ended up being my last game the morning of. And I know she resented me a lot for being over in the UK and just being away from home for a long time. She never was really part of any conversation when we'd change clubs. It was always just, we just had to go wherever the money was. And
That's probably very common for a lot of wives that are married to football players. It's like on the outside, it looks like a great life and you're traveling the world and all that sort of thing. You know, women usually need to be close to their families and things like that. I was having that conversation with someone the other day and I'm like, it would be hard. Like, yeah, you're living overseas and you're, living the life and married to a football player, but at the same time, you have to pick up and move. And like, they're the star of the show. You're always on their time. I always used to like, 7 years ago, you weren't even playing footy. And sometimes I'd be like, it's just like Dane's world and we're living in it. So a lot of women could probably relate to how that would have felt to just, you know, be moved here, there, and everywhere.
yeah. Yeah. And anyway, she decided to go home. And for the funeral, and I had an operation that I need to get done, and I reached out to her to say, because you've gone home early, we'd be coming back early, so at least I'll have someone there. And she said, I'm not coming back. And that's when I first realized that she was checked out, she's done. And
She had the two boys with her too.
she had the two boys with her, and I was quite fortunate at the time. Dad was over, and within a week, I just had to pack up my life, and that's what probably made the transition even harder. And always say it was all fault of my own, but I had to retire. I had to pack up my life in the UK, and then to deal with separation and go through a divorce all in one go was so overwhelming. And it got to a point where obviously, I struggled, and I come back to the Gold Coast to try and make things work, but she was never interested in it. And like I've said as well, like she probably should have left me years ago before that, and I'm honest about that. But
I mean, I do commend you for coming back. I do know and can assume that probably a lot of men would just go, oh, well, it's over, whatever, I'll stay here and not move home to be with their kids and things like that. And, you probably know people who have done that. It's like you're living in the UK, you could have easily stayed and you had friends there and all that sort of thing. So I remember when you told me that story, I was like, I do commend you for, coming home and being like, well, I'm still going to be a dad. I'm still going to be around. Whereas a lot of people could choose not to do that.
yeah, and so as you can imagine, I was still getting paid from the club over there. Getting a job and trying to get organised probably wasn't at the forefront of my mind at the time, because I'd been paid out by the club and financially I was doing okay then. So I moved in with Marcus and Monique, two of my friends, and it was a really challenging time. But my behaviour was still carrying on, as far as going out partying, probably carrying on like a bit of a rock star. Well, not probably, I was, and I was getting encouraged by the same people. And, a lot of those people I still, I love and adore for being around in those times. But unfortunately, I didn't have enough people in my life in that time that wanted to tell me what I needed to hear. I kept being drawn to the party scene because it was just, a mask. It was just a way for me to mask what was going on. And time after time, I was doing the same thing. I was so skinny. I'd lost so much weight, and I got so thin. I didn't even realize I was. I used to still think that, I was looking good. Like I was, and you know what I'm like. You reckon I got body dysmorphia, but I was literally, and I look at photos now and I'm like, you look so sick, like compared to what I am now.
I think it was just you could tell you weren't healthy at all.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't, and I wasn't. I was working with the NRL, and I literally was able to. I got mad social anxiety, and still to this day, it can be an issue. But I was able to work in schools with the NRL, but get it to a point where I was doing so well of booking all these schools and managing that position. I'd get Max, one of my part-time employees, to pretty much do all my work practically, and then I'd set everything up. And because we were earning all this money for the NRL, no one said two things about it because I was always ahead of all, you know.
Did you just get when you came back from the UK, did you just get set up with that job, or did you
No, I didn't work for a while. And then I was doing a bit of PT work at Jets at Palm
Oh, yeah.
Beach, and then eventually got into that job. And that was my life. I literally didn't, because I'd have big weekends, I didn't want to leave the house, and let alone go to a school and try and teach kids how to play footy. So I I had that going, and then eventually got out of that job and started working in with the QRL eventually. But before that, probably the most pivotal point in my life where I was just struggling so much. I'd go hard of a weekend. I'd come home and want to be locked in my bedroom to Wednesday, and then I'd start feeling okay, and then I'd do the whole cycle. This went on for such a long time, and I remember.
I think a lot of people are gonna be able to relate to that part.
Mm, I remember just being out one night, and it was AFL Grand Final weekend, and I was, yeah, again, filled with drugs and alcohol, and I just was at tipping point. You know, things had been going on with my ex-wife, and I just was so frustrated and at a point where I just had enough. And I knew I was at a point where I was like, I just need to be tipped, and that's it, and I'm done now. Um, and probably the hardest thing I had to do, because I was so fixated on taking my own life, and it was always something that I knew was going to happen. And at that stage of my life, it was just a matter of when. And I think I put all my eggs in one basket for, if my wife doesn't come back to me, then my life's over. Like, so, and that's not pressure I should have put on her, and it's not pressure I should put on anyone to be like, well, it's not up to her, it's up to you to make better choices, and work through that stuff. And I think that was really unfair how I was in that time. But with that said, the hardest thing I had to do was, write a letter to my two boys to, um, explain why I wasn't, going to be here anymore, and what I was going through and why. And again, there's times in that, time in my life where I was just so shut off. Like I didn't even really have any emotion to it, and I'd change it all the time, but it was always sitting there just ready to go. And I look back now, and I know time after that I would see the kids in the back of the car and I'd be with them, knowing damn well that what I was going to do. And I get emotional now about it, but back then it was like it was just part of what was going to happen.
Compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
It's like you make a decision, that's what you're gonna do, and then you just put it to the back of your mind.
Mm.
But yeah, what you were gonna say about the AFL grant?
Oh, and yeah, and so that was there, and that was, and one thing led to another, and had a falling out with my ex-wife, and that was it. And yeah, that night I'd planned it, knew how it was going to happen, and yeah. I've always been grateful for them too. The next day I was just so, I suppose, beat myself up that I still was a failure. I still, couldn't do what I planned to do. And to think about that now is so twisted, to think that, I, yeah, just thought that I couldn't even do that. And that was my way out. And I'm so grateful again for Marcus and Monique, but in that moment, I had two options. I could keep going, and I did. I was still partying on weekends. I was still doing things I'm not proud of. But
you're just trying to mask that whole thing of like I'm a failure, and like I think a lot of people go, "Oh, well, wasn't that your turning point?" But you just explained it then that you just were like, "I can't even do that." So you fell deeper into just masking it.
Yeah. And yeah, so, but then it was a Boxing Day, and I remember being out with my mates, and even my mates who like wanted to go back with their families. I ended up at a random's house, still wanting to party, and I remember walking out, and it was daylight in the morning. I was just like, "What am I doing?" Like literally, and that was the moment where I was like, "I need to start doing something. Otherwise, I'm just, I'm going to lose everyone around me along the process." And that's when I made that decision. I drew a line in the sand to go like, "You need to be better," and I did. And as soon as I started like sorting myself out, things just started to happen for me.
And one of your best mates as well, Sean,
Well,
gave you a bit of a
yeah,
wake-up call.
Sean pretty much said to me that he's seen all this happen. So Sean was always one of my mates who had been there. I met Sean when he was 18 when I was at the Cowboys, and I've known him for 20 years, and he was the one that couldn't see me, continue down this path, and so he made the courageous decision to have a crack at me this one night, tell me to wake up. And again, that was another moment where I was like, "Yep, this is fair dinkum here." And I literally was sober after Maloney said that, and from that day and from that time, around that time was where I just knew things were just adding up. I'm like, hey, I'm got to stop pointing the fingers at everyone else and just own up to it all. And 4 weeks later, I met you, and
Life changing.
what's that?
Life changing.
But it was, yeah, and was I ready for that? Probably not. You weren't, but it was again. I didn't stop drinking alcohol because obviously I met you out, but I was just in a better relationship with it. I knew I could go and have a few drinks and not do it to mask what was going on. I was in a good place. I was training more. I was eating better. I was just, all my actions were so much better. I met you, and what did you say when I walked in?
I just commented on how tall you were.
Oh, right.
Tall man.
And then, yeah, and obviously we met, and we went on a date, and then
Then a whole nother
we
part
went
of
on 2
you.
dates in the one day. You were that keen.
Oh, whatever.
But yeah, anyway, and then I suppose, yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah.
When we met, obviously I still hadn't worked through a lot of stuff,
When
so
I met you, when I met you, the first like couple of months was great. And then I started realizing that you had some like deep, deep rooted issues. And as every wife is meant to do, I wasn't a wife at the time, but I just called him out for it. And I think probably I was one of the only people who really had. And I was like, this isn't, you've got this issue here, this issue here. And sometimes I have the ability to speak truth, not in love. And I was pretty brutal a lot of the time, and we fought a lot. But I think I was one of the first people to just say to you, like, you got some shit you got to deal with. Hey, like, this is, what you're doing here is not fine. And this is probably stemming from this. And we obviously went on like a really big journey to uncover a lot of that and uncover a lot of trauma and go back in our pasts and things like that. But that obviously led to, where you are now. But the last 7 years have been a huge, huge journey. When I met you, I did I you had depression, and I'd never dealt with anyone with depression before. And it was a very, very heavy burden to carry. And I just, for the first 2 years or 3 years, the way that I described it was that you had this dark cloud hanging over you. That was the only way that I could describe it. And it looked great from the outside. Like, people looked at us and go like, "Oh, you guys are together and you guys are a perfect couple," and all that sort of thing. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, we were like fighting, having police come to our house. We were a mess. We jumped in really fast. We literally got married on the day that we had met. So 12 months later, we got married. When you know, I guess. But it was wouldn't recommend it. Like, if anyone's listening, would not recommend, especially when there's kids involved. We look back now and we're like, wow, that went really fast. It would have been really hard for a lot of the people around us. And we were both just like so in love and just besotted with each other. So we didn't see a lot of the warning signs, and I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into as well, because dealing with your depression, even though you describe it as you were in a good place, and so was I, because when I met you, I was really going on like a journey with God, and I just was very focused on just me. And I remember saying to you, I think we should just be friends. And you were like, I'm not interested. You first were like, thank you so much for your honesty, but I'm not interested in being friends with you. And I was like, okay, well, we can just see what happens. But yeah, I just didn't realize, all the stuff that you had been through. And a lot of it was hidden from me for a long time. We had some issues there with you not being truthful about your past and things like that. And I consider myself a pretty intuitive person, and I knew that some things weren't adding up. And I just had to we both had to journey through trust issues. We had to journey through like just so much. I had no idea how to deal with someone with depression. Um, I was very angry and I was like, can't you just get over it? Like snap out of it. You're just depressed, this and that. Um, and yeah, it was a very long journey of us going through. People just think like, oh, maybe we've sorted it out. We have been to marriage courses, we've been to marriage counselors, we have been to psychologists, we have, sort of done it all. But yeah, I think with both of us, we both had so much stuff that we needed to work on ourselves for you to get to the point where you are now. And I think it took me calling it out of you and just being like, hey, we can't be married if this is going to continue, if you're not going to get help. And you ended up, I mean, you don't like me saying this, but you pretty much got diagnosed with ADHD and ASD. And that helped me understand a lot, because my son has both of those as well. And it was almost like I was dealing with a bigger version of him sometimes, and realizing that some of the things you couldn't control, and some of the situations that you were put in, you found really, really difficult to be in. And, sometimes you were constantly triggered by everything. And the people who know you the closest, like Sean and a few others, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And you are very easily triggered by stuff. And I just used to get so frustrated and be like, I would just get so angry at you. And I think that was when you sort of you started opening up a lot about your mental health, talking about it more on social media and things like that, and talking about your journey as a father and things like that. And I just used to call you a hypocrite, because I could
Well, that's where
see.
you resented me for it, because
Yeah.
I was on social media being one version to some, and then same again, not, representing that at home. And I've said this a long time. It's only in the last 12 months that Lydia's probably backed me to a point where you're so invested in what I do now, because you've seen me actually do the work. But during that time early on, you resented me a lot because I was being someone to everyone else, but then I wasn't doing that at home.
Yeah.
And I get that, and that's why I said recently, like, it's so refreshing now to know that I've done the work and to have your support, like, because this doesn't work if I don't have you on board.
And there's still, like, for people listening, there's still so much work for us to do. Like, we both still need,
Yeah, definitely.
therapy, and we both still need help to fix some of those issues and whatever. But we've just come such a long way in the last like 6 months. And that's a big reason of why I have started supporting you. Whereas for years I didn't, and I had so much resentment for you. Our lives were just like filled with resentment, really. And we just treated each other awfully for a long time. Um, and yeah, it was because you were going and you were doing these talks, and you were going around to, schools and football clubs, and posting on social media about, your mental health journey and how you were helping other men and all that sort of thing. And you had started your men's group, Men of Gold, um, after realizing that so many men needed that space, which is actually such a blessing to so many men. But at the time, I was like, how are you going and helping all these men, but you're coming home and being the absolute opposite of what you're preaching? And every single time I would see you post something, I would just get furious because you just weren't living out, the man that you were claiming to be. And we've had a talk about it before. We actually almost had an argument the other day while we were walking about it. Well, while we were talking about it. But um, I think for you, it was easier to just help other men. Like you were just saying before, it's easier for you to help others than to address your issues. And yeah, we got to a point where we just couldn't do it any longer. Hey.
And in this too, it's not just you and I. There was,
Mm,
the dynamic of having, blended family, which is the, biggest, thing that I've had to deal with, and bringing two families together, two different types of parenting.
values,
There was so much
everything.
in all that. So it wasn't just a matter of, oh, we met, we lived in a house and we got on. We moved the kids in way too early. We did some things, we made some mistakes along the way, but um, we had so much other outside influences that were
Yeah.
also challenging our life. We had ex-partners that were really putting
Pressure
strain
on.
on our relationship, and I held on to that for such a long time, and especially your past. But
Mm,
um, a big thing for me, the resentment and bitterness I had towards Addison's father,
mm,
which I've been pretty open about that,
yeah.
and I could never let it go. And I won't go into detail, but there's a Christmas early on that um, really got me to a point where I'm like, I could never let go of this. And
Mm,
through my newfound faith in Christ, I had to learn how to forgive and properly forgive and let
mm,
go of bitterness and resentment. And
mm,
it was literally only 12 months ago, almost to the day where I actually had to
yeah.
meet him.
Yeah.
Like, and
Well, you
well,
had
when
to
I say
address that
meet
in
him, like
yourself.
I've met him before, but
Yeah.
to actually be intentional to say, there's a reason why I
Mm,
need to do this. And
yeah.
he doesn't really understand because he's not a man of faith, but there's a big pivotal moment in our marriage to be able to do that, because that was stopping a lot of us moving forward,
Yeah.
was me holding on to a lot of that. And I'm aware of that, and that's why I needed to do what I need to do. Rewind a little bit to that is, we're at a point where our marriage was over, and so it's not a it wasn't just a, throughout the process. It was a time where I'm like, you had the opportunity to just step away and go, I'm done, and
Mm,
you had
yeah.
checked out.
And I think that's like speaking to a lot of women here who have either probably been through a divorce or are going through, similar struggles with their partner or whatever. A lot of women, like we check out long before we actually make the decision to leave. And I had just been, you know, there was years of just torment and tears and just being upset and so frustrated. I was trying to control it all myself. And even though we were going to church and, I was doing my best to give it to God, I just was clinging on to control for so long that I just thought I would be the one to change you. And, me leaving would be the thing that would change things or you getting closer with God. Like I just thought that it'd be because of all these different things. And I just checked out and at the at the end of last year was when our marriage completely fell apart, and some big things happened, and we just got to a point where I just said like I'm actually done, and you knew that. I think there was a few times where I'd said no, I'm done, blah blah blah, and then we'd give it a go because one thing about me, like I'll give everything my all, and I'd said that to you so many times, but it was just got to the point where I knew that you weren't willing to focus on your shit and work on your stuff. That I just said I'm done, and I actually don't trust that you'll change because you've said it so many times. You had said so many times, I'll try and be a better husband, and I'll try and be a better stepdad, and I'll try and be a better father and partner and all that sort of thing. And it just never happened. You'd kind of mask it and just put on a face for a couple of weeks to the point where I would be like, yeah, okay, maybe he is changing. And then you just go straight back into, how you were and depressive and cold and, like you would just shut off, like completely shut off. And that was like a very, very lonely, um, the last few years was a very lonely time in my life. I used to explain it to you like I felt like I was a single mum again, even though I was married with a beautiful house and a beautiful family. Felt so alone. I felt like it was just me and my son against the world, or against you, really. The way that a psychologist has explained it was that you would come in and you were like the threat to our family, which is crazy because you were my husband. And just to paint a picture for you guys who are listening, because it was, yeah, it was, and I know that other women will listen to this and go, I feel exactly the same, feel very like alone in my marriage. And yeah, we just got to a point where we were seeing a marriage counselor at the time, and I just said like I'm done, like I'm just so done. And I think that was a pivotal moment for you because we had some stuff go on and you kind of had like a physical reminder you'd hurt yourself,
Mhm.
and not in like a bad way, like by accident.
Yep.
And I think for you having that physical reminder, plus I left and I had no intention of coming back. I was looking for rentals, like, I'd seen went and seen a divorce lawyer, like there was a lot going on that I was just like very, very checked out. And our marriage counselor said to me, like, just give him one more chance. And I really didn't want to. I was just so done. And I don't know what happened, but from that moment, you just did like a 360. You were just like a different man. You decided to acknowledge a lot of the resentment and bitterness that you had for me, for, external, you know, our environment. Like there was just so much. And you just decided to get closer with God. You started like reading your Bible every day and praying over me. And I mean, I can't speak for what went on in your mind there, but I just know that from that moment you were just like a different person. And there's definitely times where you sort of slip back into that, but it's almost like I'm married to a completely different man. And it's been, what are we now? It's been like 8, 9 months of you doing that. So you've been pretty consistent.
That was probably, like I said, and it was for me, who's dealt with abandonment issues all my life. I was like, I had mum leave, my ex-wife leave, without acknowledging that obviously my ex-wife left me because of my own behaviour. It was still these same things that were happening in my life. And then you were about to go, and I'm like, here we go again. But this was different. And I know the work I'd done on myself prior, to that within my own mental health, even though it wasn't fixed, if I hadn't done the work to get where I'd gotten to that stage, because I'm no finished product by no means, like I still struggle every day. I still need to work on my things every day. We don't just work through things. And this is what, we'll talk on this podcast about is, you don't just go and get help and be healed and then it's
Mm.
just a magic potion and then you're
Like every
done.
day.
It's a daily thing, like, so you've got to be invested into it for the rest of your life. We all experience a traumatic experience in our life, like a lot of us, and the more we understand that, and again, you're great at being aware of that and understanding. You love the psychology behind it all. Trust me, I'm a patient every day, but it is true, and I found all that out. But then as I grew, I used to struggle, and again, I come back to the resentment and bitterness for one person, but that ended up being two people, and it ended up being you as well, because I resented Addison's father for how he was as a person, but then I'd see him in Addison, so I resented him. And as again, twisted as that may sound, it was honest. That's
We're
just how
being
I used.
very, very honest
Yeah,
here on
this
this
is just
podcast.
this is just as open and honest as I can be, and that's I would seem, and I, I wouldn't be mean to him or nasty. I just probably wouldn't give him the same as I would my own kids, and you made that
Yeah.
pretty aware. And I'm just being
I
honest, but
think you'll
it's
speak to a lot of people because I used to say to you, how are you going to, say if someone comes to your men's group and is struggling with the same thing, struggling with resentment or being a stepdad or anything, how are you going to speak to that
mm,
person? You're going to have absolutely no idea how to do that. Now I think you have like somewhat of a idea. You still have like quite a bit to go,
mm,
but that still comes down to it just the way that I think of it is like it runs so deep. Like for you to be a father, let alone a stepfather, is challenging for you because you went through your own stuff
Mm,
as a father, and we repeat our cycles and we repeat how we were loved. And I used to say to you, like, why can't you just be like that? And why can't you be like that? And you never experienced that. And so it goes back to us trying to mesh two, childhoods and values and all that sort of thing together. And it just wasn't possible for you. But I think with you, I've definitely seen this change in you, especially with my son. Um, you can tell that your heart has changed for a lot of things. It's not just you trying to mask things. And I remember, I can't remember what we were talking about, but we were just like talking in bed one day, and you said something about it, being a challenge every day to, you were like, I kind of feel lost, like with who I am. And I said, well, of course you're going to feel like that because you're trying to break old patterns and old habits. And that is part of the process of doing that hard work. And it's why a lot of people stay clear from that or don't want to address that because you breaking old patterns is really hard. And choosing to be self-aware and go, okay, I'm going to choose a different way to respond to this. I'm going to take myself away and look at my own heart. And I think that that's what you've done really well in the last couple of months is you've had that self-awareness and gone, okay, like I want something different for my life. And it, was probably because I had decided to leave or anything like that. But I think you were fed up with yourself too. And
mm,
I think you were fed up with, and I used to just say to you, why do you want to live so miserably? Like, why do you want to be this person? And we went and saw this movie. What was the movie called? Yeah, A Man Named Otto. And if you've seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about. But it's pretty much just this old grumpy man who's just annoyed at every single person, and he tries to take his own life. It, and I just like looked at Dane and I was like, that's what you're going to end up like. You're going to end up miserable and annoyed at everything. And he was like, oh, like you've mentioned this on a podcast, I'm pretty sure, but you were just like, oh wow, like it was a bit of a reminder to you that if you didn't change how you were, you would end up like that too. And I would always say like, oh, good luck with your third
mm,
marriage, and they'll have to deal with that. But you know, I just now I think you've just had such a heart change, and I see that in the way that you parent your boys and the way that you are with my son. And it's an everyday thing,
mm.
like it's an everyday choice
Yeah,
for you to do
the
that.
Otto illustration was something I got upset about because, and I have mentioned that before, is I literally was watching a movie that if you change their character out and put me in it, that's how I was leading my life,
Mm,
and that's why it did put things in perspective. But um, like I say, it was a heart change, and I had to change the way I thought about people, the way that's, and again that's a daily action as well. Like I couldn't, and again, being a hypocrite, I can't have a faith in God and
mm,
see the way that Jesus decides to love us every day,
mm,
despite our flaws.
mm,
Everything that we are and everything that our past has presented, we come before Him every day, and He's like, I still love you. But
mm,
I can't do that to people in my life, and my stepson and yourself and other people. And I'm like, we have to love on others, and that's
mm,
how we're designed, and
mm,
that's our faith is, that's
yeah,
the forefront of that.
yeah,
And so here I was leading, saying that I'm a Christian and that I've found this faith in God, but then I'm actually not walking it in parts. I'm
mm,
almost compartmentalizing my faith,
mm,
choosing when to do it and when people see it, and then when people don't see it, I wasn't being who God created me to be. And that's what I always come back to now, and that's why I'm doing what I do now, and that's why I'm, again, with your support, doing my men's group, running Men of Gold, and seeing men make that courageous decision to show up and want to open up. And I'm always pushing that because there's no two ways about, and getting men and people in general just to be better. Like suicide rate hasn't changed. We're 9 people today will take their own life. You know, 7 men, 2 women today, they've had enough. They've checked out. And I don't want to shave that off by 1 or 2. I want it gone. And I'm like, there's the way through that is being vulnerable and open and sharing how we're feeling. There's no two ways about it. And people can argue all day with me about it, but the only way we're going to know people are struggling and you're going through things is if we have these conversations. And this is why I created this, and this is something I've wanted to do for so long. I'm so passionate about because I want people sitting across from me, sharing their life story, sharing something that they may have hid for a long time or not so comfortable sharing, because I know there's people out there that need to hear this, and there's so many relatable stories and things within each story that we can lean on and be encouraged by. But going back to that, like as well, like Simon in the UK, and again, and I've said it's no accident. I know God's been shaping my life for this moment right now. But knowing that so many people are drawn to me to want to share how they're feeling, they want help or they reach out to me, and I've often said, like, why people feel so inclined to come to me for all this, and I think it's a God-given gift on my life. And so for me to be obedient to God is I want to keep doing this. And it's like we can all be different hands and feet of his work, and I just feel a big part of mine is leading by example in this space and doing it now with my own family, not just doing it in front of people to get pats on the back and look like I'm a good bloke outside my home, but doing it in all aspects. And like I say, that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us us, is that we're open about it, and we're open and people love it. And we won't stop, because you have a heart to serve others as well. And I think together it's something we'll continually do. Well, not something we will continue to do, but
it's funny that you say that about the leadership thing, and you're doing what God has called you to do, because for years I sort of resented that. And I think I've had this conversation with a few women before, where you always say, like, you don't fall in love with someone's potential, sort of thing. And for a long time I saw something in you that you were definitely called for leadership. You were definitely, like, you're always the hardest worker in the room. You always have been pretty vulnerable to a certain extent. Obviously, it's gotten a lot more lately, but and you've always had people come to you and things like that. And I always used to sort of resent that because of how you were acting behind closed doors. But I knew that there was something in you that it's almost like I didn't see your potential. I saw the gifts that God had given you, and I was holding on to that. And, that's why we didn't give up on our marriage, because I was just like, I see the man that God has made him to be. He's in there somewhere, but if that comes out, I don't know. But obviously it did, and now you're getting to live that, and it's actually beautiful for me to watch. The man that all the gifts that God has placed on your life, you are now getting to live out and be that man that I had prayed for so long, and I saw that man, and yeah. Just the fact that, you're gonna change a lot of people's lives through that. That's what I prayed for so long, not just for me, for our family, but I know that there's other people listening to this that you're gonna help, and you're gonna change their lives, and maybe you're that one person that gets them to go, I don't feel alone. So I'm just, really proud of you.
it's beautiful. But well, we might wrap it up there. But yeah, I know, thank you for all the support that you've given me. And again, I think that gives a pretty good picture of, our life, but my journey as well. And again, I just encourage, other people listening to this is, to come along the journey, because, I have some really powerful people in mind that I want to, dive in, not the surface level stuff, but the deep stuff, and get to know people on a deeper level. And I know that these people that will come on will change lives as well. And I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, and just grateful for the people that are in my life that are pushing me to do this, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. So thanks, my love. Thanks for tuning in to the Rise Above podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to listen and be part of these real conversations. A big thank you to Active Coolangatta for proudly sponsoring this podcast. Your support means a lot. You can catch every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.